nice to virtually see you. My name is Lisa Schneider, and I am talking about leveraging the product mindset for successful leadership. I've been doing product for close to 20 years, so I like to say I've been doing product since before we had a name for it. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I'm happy to share that here today. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was sort of the rise of product and product leaders. On LinkedIn, the number of job listings worldwide for CPOs, Chief Product Officers, has increased 5x in just a couple of years. So something that was sort of a niche job and people would be like, product, what is that? Is becoming really, really popular and common. And so it's a great career path and really helpful to learn sort of how the skills you learn coming up can help you pivot into those C-level executive roles. The CPO role, it has been around for a while, but it's changed in a couple of ways. So what I wanted to point out is this idea that maybe around 2009, I don't take any of this that literally, but we started kind of like seeing CPOs in tech companies. By 2016, the idea was that the primary collaborator was the VP of engineering, right? Or the CTO. And so it was still very much you're kind of off in your walled garden, you're doing product and engineering, and that's where you sit and that's where you focus. But what's really happened is that the collaborations have changed so that the CPO is really part of the executive strategy team working with the CEO and working with other sort of C-level folks in the C-suite. And this is pretty typical of these roles, right? Harvard Business Review talks about the fact that as you get into these roles, you're expected not just to sort of focus on your vertical, but to really work cross-functionally on strategy at a very high level. So the product skills that can help you do all of that really are basic to the product mindset, but I never like to assume. So I want to talk a little bit about what they are. So the first thing is asking why. One of my funnest jobs was working at Merriam-Webster, and yes, funnest is a word. And so when I would get interviewed and people would say, what's your favorite word? I would say my favorite word is why. And everybody would be really surprised because they thought I would pick something very obscure or very pretty sounding. And I would always say, don't underestimate the small words. Why really solves problems. So asking why, yes, Tanya, excellent. And I'm looking at the chat. So if anybody's not, that's what I'm responding to, right? So asking why is really important. Why do you think that? Why do we assume that? Why is that important to you, right? Really, really important product skill. Another one is being problem focused, right? So when people say oh, let's do this feature, our response is, or kind of is supposed to be, well, what problem are we trying to solve with that, right? How will we test it? How will we know? What is it supposed to do? So the idea of being problem focused and not solution focused is really key part of the product mindset. Another one is outcome focused. And problem could be opportunity. Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a really excellent point, right? And so outcome focused, right? What are we going to get out of this? How are we going to measure it, right? What does success look like? How do we know? Really important. We talk about being user focused all the time, right? So that it becomes this user first, right? We want to put the user first. And we're going to talk about sort of how that can play out in some different ways in the C-level. So that whole set of we're focused on problems, outcomes, and users becomes really important, but we're going to learn how you can pivot that in some slightly different ways. The test and learn mindset is really important, right? Oh, somebody has a different idea. Oh, that's interesting. Let's test it and see. So that's super important that we don't assume, particularly as we get up to that C-suite, right? I think historically, there's been a very lot of oh, I'm the C-level. I know what I'm talking about. I know the answer. And I always say I don't know the answer. Let's test it and find out, right? I don't care what I think. I want to follow the data. Being cross-functional becomes super important, and we'll talk about that. So, we think very much, again, right, that 2016, okay, I work with the CTO and we're in our little bubble. I don't even think that was true in 2016, to be honest, right? It was sort of more of a general point, but the idea that, this is going to affect marketing, this is going to affect sales, this is going to affect customer service, right? How do we both think about what the impact of our work is and also include those people in upfront planning earlier on? So that cross-functional mindset is super important. Also being transparent, right? This is how we do this, right? We use different decisioning matrices, right? There are like frameworks that we use for a lot of things. I like to show my work, right? I found it to be really effective. And I've had people say to me like, oh, because I can see how you decided which projects to prioritize, I don't take it personally when it's not mine, because they can see how the thinking is. They can see that it isn't personal. They can see that we're really focused, right, on outcomes, on opportunities. And so that transparency is really important, especially as a senior leader, where it can be a little bit harder to be closer and to gain trust. And of course, empathy, right? Being empathetic and thinking about, I think this is really related to user focused, because the idea that you can be user focused without really thinking about sort of their problems and their experiences doesn't make sense. But I always think that that is really worth calling out. So those are sort of the core skill sets. Let's talk about sort of how those play out and what that means. And the most important thing is I sort of called this meet your new users. So we talk about, being user first and user driven. So who are your users? And your new users are your fellow C-suite, the CEO, and the board. And so what I mean by that is there's this idea a little bit of first team, and a lot of you may have heard this expression, first team. So your first team, if you're, a CPO, might be the chief marketing officer, the chief financial officer, right? If there's a sort of chief customer service officer, obviously the CEO. But if you think about those partners as your users, how do you give them an excellent user experience? That is something that really can change the dynamic, and take those skills of thinking about user experience. What is your problem? How do I help you solve it? So that it doesn't become like product against marketing or product against finance, right? At a lower level, it's really easy to think like, oh, financial person, CFO is just a bean counter, and, they're a block to funding or whatever it is. But, at the C level, they're your partner, right? And they can be your friend, and they can be a big help, as long as you think about, how do I give them an excellent user experience, right? How do I become someone that they turn to help solve problems? How do I become somebody that they feel like they can count on in terms of being a strategic partner? That will really make you a very effective CPO. Same is true for the CEO, right? That's your immediate boss. This is probably true for any immediate boss that you have, but especially the CEO that is juggling so much and under so many pressures. So really think about the folks that you're dealing with at a high level. How do you give them an excellent user experience? How do you become somebody that they can rely on and count on and really see as a partner? Will help you be very effective as a leader in general, really influential in strategy. And of course, right, trickle down now to your product organization. The next opportunity you have is to really impact strategy. And so I'm going to pause here and just answer questions as they come up, because I think it's good to be interactive. So Heather's asking, does cross-functional mean that being able to work on a cross-functional team but have your own expertise? Or it means that one can wear multiple hats? I think it's usually the former, right? That you're on a cross-functional team, but you have your own expertise. So for example, I'll think about the CFO as my partner. And so we're on a team together, but I have my own expertise. The CFO has their own expertise, right? We're not interchangeable. And ultimately, the CFO is going to make the calls in their purview, and I'm going to make the calls in my purview. But I think at a high level, it also means really thinking about how do I collaborate with these people, as opposed to push my ideas to these people, is maybe a better way of putting it. And so again, all of that is going to help you sort of impact strategy. But the thing that I think is most effective is to break this pattern, right? Here's something that often happens, right? We kind of understand the mission, and then everybody comes up with feature ideas, right? And they're like, we could do this, we could do that. Can you get it on the roadmap? When can this get done? Right? That's my favorite. I have an idea. When can this get done? Can you get it on the roadmap? And so folks can be super frustrated by that. And so a thing that can break that is this product planning hierarchy. And, everybody's got their different tools. This happens to be one of my favorites. So I do want to take a moment to talk through it a little bit. So the first one is the mission, right? Why do we do what we do? That's the thing that, people usually have, particularly in startups, right? There is a sense of like, we know what the mission is. What's the vision, right? What is this going to look like when we're done? I mean, you're kind of never done, but what is this going to look like, right? We are starting with an MVP. It's kind of smaller in scope, and this is what we envision when we're done, right? What is the objective? How are we going to measure impact, right? What are those metrics? Is it dollars? Is it revenue? Is it some kind of other number? Is it market share? Is it number of people? Is it changes in systems or processes, right? Particularly if you're in, let's say, some kind of social enterprise organization, right? Did we make something accessible to more people? Did we change a system that was problematic, right? But how is it that we're going to measure what it is that we're doing? And then how we're going to approach getting there, right? This is the general thing, right? I could go from here to LA. I'm in New York. I can go in a boat. I can't go in a boat. It's going to be really long, but I could go in a boat, but it'd be really long, right? I can go on a plane, a train, a car. What's the strategy? Then, there's all of these steps to doing those things. But first you need a general strategy. Then you get to the product roadmap, which is really about prioritization, right? Which things are we going to prioritize? And then you get into that product plans and features, right? We think about experiments and bets and things that we're trying. And the reason that this is so important as a strategic planning tool, and the reason that you can bring this into the C-suite and be so effective, is that whole middle portion, right, tends to get either maybe left out or assumed, or it's done let's say in your product organization, but not at a broad level and shared with the company. And when that happens, that's when people don't understand, right? Why are we doing this product? Or I have an idea. Why are you saying no to it? And the reason that they maybe don't understand why you're saying no to it, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, is because these in-between pieces are not clear, right? If it was really clear, well, here's where we want to end up, and here's how we're going to measure it, and here's generally how we're getting there, right? If we have agreement on these things, you'll find a lot less tension and pushback about these things. And these things are where you see a lot of tension and pushback. So as a leader, as a CPO, if you can bring this into the C-suite, you will see a huge change in the conversations and the level of productivity of the conversations, and in them not getting stuck as often. And then the next thing is what I call kind of bridging the product sales gap. And this image of volleyball I used because I describe this as sales throwing something over the net, or product throwing something over the net. So this goes back to that question about cross-functional collaboration, right? So if I'm in product and I build something and I hand it over to sales and marketing, I'm like, here, take this out, market this, sell this, and they haven't been involved, that feels really tough for them. They're like, but that's not what the market wants, or that's, not a messaging that's going to resonate, whatever their issues are. From product perspective, the thing that happens all the time is sales comes back, right? I just had a meeting and the client wants this and they're a big partner. We have to do this right away, right? Or I just had a meeting and they'll buy it if we build this thing right away. And the question becomes when can we get this done, right? And so they're lobbing the ball over the net. They're like, hey, I got this ball here. Now it's yours. When can we get this done? So the thing you want to do is do not immediately answer this question. This is a false binary. Right? Can we do this? Yes or no? When can we get this done? Give me a date, right? Give me a date or tell me no. That's a false binary. And the reason is because you want to think about the client as your user. So you go back and you have that whole same conversation. You say, oh, the client wants this. That's really interesting. I'm so curious. I wonder why they want it, right? I wonder what problem are they trying to solve? And if you can get the salesperson to bring you back into the conversation, most of the time, they're really happy to do that. And the reason is it takes the pressure off of them. And also, the client will usually talk to the product person differently. The client's so happy to have direct access to product that they'll engage in a conversation. They don't feel like they're being sold when they're talking to product. So they'll have that exploratory conversation, and start answering the questions, because as we know, sometimes the features that people ask for are not even actually the features that they need to solve the problem, right? They're a little bit jumping the gun. And so again, if you can stop the game of volleyball and turn it into a collaboration and reframe the conversation to a product-led one, right, you can really change that. And I have so many case studies of these, but like, you know, I went into an organization where there literally were like 5 clients, it's not even that many. And the 5 clients, there was a spreadsheet, and they had 5 different like things that they needed. And there were these big expensive meetings where they brought in like everyone in the product and engineering organization, and marketing was there. So like on paper, it was cross-functional, but it was all about the client wants this. How can we do this? When are you going to do this? And when I came in, I said, wait a minute, let's find the through line. Right? Like what is actually happening here? Like this is 5 clients, we're doing these 5 bespoke things. Like, is this really necessary? And it turned out that in fact, we were able to find a single through line of what problem they were trying to solve and create one partner platform that would work for all of them. And so, you know, it was almost like too good to be true, except it was really true. And I think if they, yeah, this is Tanya, this is a great question, right? Like if they refuse to ask the clients these questions, the question is like, at what level, right? Are they refusing? And again, how do you then, why are they refusing? Right? Because, you know, can you bring them a case study? Can you say, well, you know, here's an example of like, you know, we've uncovered this thing that turned out to be totally scalable, right? What is their block, right? Are they under pressure to make a deal? Like again, have that empathy, understand their pressures, give them a good user experience. So you want to stop like the head-to-head going against each other and make it more of a discovery with the salesperson. Like figure out, how do you get them to understand, not force them to understand, but bring them to understand that this questioning can help. Because if you can do what I'm describing, right? This was at a social enterprise startup also. So like resources were really lean. By finding one thing that we could build, then everybody was aligned with that. And then we were able to build that. It was scalable. You can sell it to more people, right? How do you show them that this will work out better for them, right? How do you get them to bring you into the conversation so they're not the ones on the hook for it, is the other thing, right? So it's like not about them asking. It's like, can I come in? Bring me along, right? Let me hear directly from them. You know, give them examples as to how discovery has led to clarification, right? And bring them into that process so they're a part of it. So we only have a couple of minutes left. This is a short session. Just real quick, I'll give the takeaways and we'll have 1 or 2 minutes for questions. So really approach your C-suite and your CEO and the board as your users, right? Your first team and your key users, and really figure out how is it that you like bring them in and give them a great user experience. It will make you really effective across the organization. And then that will trickle down into product, but you're not only focused on product. Second is using the product planning hierarchy to align stakeholders around impact strategy and not features. And again, we're really short for time, but I would not be surprised if you all had your own case studies of where there was alignment, like where you did, I always call it like go slow to go fast. Right? Take the time to figure out that messy middle, those middle things, because it will be much easier to align on like decisions around features and prioritization when those things are clear. If you can do that at a strategic level across the company so everyone's bought in, it just makes for really incredible culture. And then the last thing is to get involved with client requests so that you can reframe those in really more of a product thinking way and sort of end that game of volleyball. So that is leveraging the product mindset for successful leadership. I'm really happy that you all were here, and we have about 1.5 minutes for questions. If there are any further questions, you can drop them in chat. I don't think I'm able to let folks speak. All right, we'll give it another moment. Okay. Yeah, what happens if the organization is still lifting to product-led or product thinking? I think, you know, this is about leveraging this once you're in the C-suite. And so all of these conversations and thinking about how do you bring them along as users, right? What is their user journey to coming to this? How do you solve their problems so that they understand that this works for them? That's really the way that you would do it as an executive. If you're, you know, lower, and again, it can depend, but if, you know, if you're lower than a VP, right? Your impact is going to be different. You can do all of these things, but you know, they might not trickle up as well, but you know, you can try. I would just say, like, use these everywhere, try everywhere. Because once people understand and they have that light bulb moment, it can be really helpful. So thank you all again. We're at time. It was really a pleasure, and enjoy the rest of the conference.